Welcome everyone to Thursday, April 3rd, 2025 webinar series here of the IARPIC Risk and Hazards Working Group. And we created this webinar series to connect the community engaged in developing tools and also data sets to support the communities in the Arctic affected by various hazards, geohazards, climate hazards, and to identify opportunities and new tools and new data development to support hazard planning and management. So today I am very excited to have the Polar Geospatial Center represented here with Jay Dickson. Jay is the director of the Polar Geospatial Center at the University of Minnesota, and he received his bachelor's from Hampshire College and master's in Geographic Information Science and Technology from the University of Southern California. And he spent a master's from Southern California and a bachelor from Hampshire College. And he spent 14 years at Brown University as a research scientist with the Planetary Geosciences Group, and then 7 years at Caltech, where he started the Bruce Murray Laboratory for Planetary Visualization. And he is a remote sensing and geospatial data scientist who has worked with NASA missions to Mars, the Moon, and Mercury, and also conducted 8 seasons of fieldwork in the McMurdo dry valleys of Antarctica. And since 2023, he has been the director of the Polar Geospatial Center at the University of Minnesota. So thank you so much, Jay. I'll hand it over to you. We'll have about a half hour of Jay presenting, and then we're going to have questions and discussions for the remainder of the time together today. Thank you, Jay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anna. Thank you for inviting me. I was mentioning earlier that Anna emailed Claire Porter from PGC, who's on the call here, and myself, and I just happened to respond to the email first, so I'm giving the talk. I'm giving a talk that Claire could very easily give as well, and Claire should feel free to unmute and clarify or correct anything. She's a PGC veteran, but I'm happy to speak for PGC, about PGC and the work that we support in the Arctic. And I benefited from the invitation email that I got for this, that there was a list of really clear questions that were very helpful. So I'm just making this talk direct answers to those questions. They're really, really clear, and it helps structure what can be sort of a sprawling topic. PGC tends to sprawl. We work everywhere all the time with remote sensing data. So I hope that this can sort of give you a clear idea of the work that we do and how it might be able to support your work, and how it relates to risks and risk mitigation and hazards in the Arctic. I want to start out by showing the team that's behind everything that you're going to see here. This is the Polar Geospatial Center staff and students, just a really amazing team who dedicate their lives to geospatial information, particularly at the Earth's poles. So there's a lot of talent represented on this slide, and they contributed almost everything you see that I'm about to talk about. So thank them for all of their support. So trying to sum up what PGC does in one line is we support scientists and logistics professionals by taking our geospatial expertise at very high resolution at continental scales. So we work at a very, very detailed level, but over wide expanses of space over long periods of time. And I'll show you some data that demonstrates that. And what that means is that since we work at high resolution over very large expanses over very long periods of time, we can impact a lot of people. We can support a lot of people who are doing work in very remote places. So one of the questions I was got was what is your geographical area of interest? I'm assuming this question means like, where in Alaska do you work? Where in the Canadian Arctic? Where's your field site? I tend to think a little bit bigger. So me personally, my geographic area of interest is the solar system. Any rocky body that we have remote sensing data from, that's where you'll find me. As I was mentioned in my bio, I've worked on missions to Mercury, the Moon, Mars, done a lot of work in the inner solar system. I've worked with Hubble data of Europa. So geospatial data of places that don't have too many sort of risks and hazards in the way that we're going to be talking about in this presentation, but trying to map planetary surfaces. And we always have to remind ourselves that the Earth is a planet. And I've spent a lot of time working at the Earth's poles, particularly in Antarctica, where I did 8 seasons of field work. And I supported a project when I was at Caltech in Alaska doing time-lapse imaging of some streams that are cutting through permafrost near some indigenous communities. So do have some experience working with teams that work in the Arctic as well. So a lot of visualization on the ground and from remote sensing. And remote sensing is what we're going to be talking about mostly in this presentation. But a lot of data integration. So taking imagery that you see on the left and integrating it with met station data, a lot of long-term monitoring, collaborating with long-term ecological research programs. So software development to integrate data, cause and effect, climate inputs, how do they manifest on the surface in the Arctic. We're looking at the erosion of permafrost banks over time. You can see us syncing them with flow depth monitors. So a lot of work trying to understand how landscapes evolve over time. So that's a lot of my personal, professional work before I got to PGC. But at PGC, I've been able to sort of apply my remote sensing techniques and abilities and work with the team that is very, very well trained and highly experienced in taking particularly satellite imagery. When I say remote sensing, most of the time we're referring to satellite data, but at very, very high resolution of the Earth's surface. And the fortuitous nature of most of the satellites that we work with is that they're in polar orbits, so they're covering the poles of the Earth all the time being about every 90 minutes or so. So we just get tons and tons of data at the poles, which produces this extraordinary record of surface conditions recorded in satellite imagery. So the real answer to the question is what is my geographical area of interest right now? It's the Earth's poles. So Antarctica there on the right, and what we'll be talking about in this presentation is the Arctic and all the terrific science and logistics operations that we support in the Arctic. So the audience that we were trying to reach and support, we are funded by the National Science Foundation and the Office of Polar Programs to support researchers. I say researchers because it's scientists, but also logistics professionals, facilities personnel. Anyone affiliated with or funded by the Office of Polar Programs can reach out to the Polar Geospatial Center for geospatial support. We also host a large amount of publicly available data that anyone can access, and including in the Arctic. So the broader research community and the public can access what we provide as well. Where does PGC fit in terms of sort of the data to scientist to researcher pipeline? The primary source of data that we work with come from commercial satellites, Maxar, Planet, and BlackSky. These satellite companies, I think many on the call probably already know this, have a license with the U.S. government, so that if you are federally funded, you have access to this data free of charge for the research you are funded to perform. The challenge is that most of the researchers that we support don't have an access point and aren't geospatial specialists, so aren't entirely capable of working with these tremendous data resources themselves. So that's the service that PGC here at the University of Minnesota can provide. We sort of provide that link in the chain of data producer to data user. And we don't just sort of click a button and send data to people and put it on an FTP site. We are funded to work with them and make sure that they're using the data properly and getting the most out of the data. So we provide that sort of vital link in the chain to make large amounts of remote sensing data available to researchers to help them with their projects. The spatial and temporal scales that we're working with, we try to do things big at PGC over large areas, over increasingly longer and longer time scales. We typically tend to work at very, very high resolution, sub-meter scale for our imagery, and meter scale for the elevation models that we'll talk about. And when you do that, anyone who's trying to do work in these areas, in Antarctica on the left and on the Arctic on the right, can see tremendous value in the products that we produce. So we try to meet users where they are, and we're able to impact a lot of research by covering very, very large swaths of land. We do work in non-polar areas as well, which I'm not going to talk about in this presentation, but our primary focus remains on the Earth's poles. Temporally, we have data going back over 15 years now. So this shows the data volume at PGC up until 2024. We do have data that dates back before this, but we're working with a just growing archive of the record of the Earth's surface conditions from high resolution satellite imagery, sub-meter resolution, going back close to 20 years at this point, going back to the Iconos and QuickBird days from Digital Globe, now Maxar. So that's when I got started doing Antarctic work. I was using Iconos data that was acquired 20 some odd years ago. So PGC has built this archive over the last 15, 17 years, and that's available to all research communities, Office of Polar Program funded researchers to access. In some areas, specifically in Alaska, we also host aerial overflight data. So if you're looking for sort of that meter scale imagery going back further in time, in the case of Alaska, going back to 1978, we have a large volume of over 60,000 scanned images of the surface of Alaska. You can see stream channels there on the valley floor. We are dedicating a lot of effort to making these data as functional as possible, using computer vision to register and rectify them to the surface, so that this sort of temporal scale at which we look doesn't go back to just when we've had satellites in orbit collecting these data, but can go back further in time to these aerial overflight data. So that's an ongoing effort at PGC, is to make these data integrate well with our modern resources. So if you're trying to monitor hazards and risks, and you want to see how landscapes are evolving over time, this extends that baseline of time for researchers, as long as we can make these data as functional as possible. And that's what we're working with. A major part of what we do is engaging with our end users. So we have a whole segment. Half of PGC is our user services group, and their job is to interface with the community, to listen to our users, and make sure they're aware of all the services that we provide. So we do that in multiple ways. The digital way in which we do that is through a software interface called Fridge. This is available. This has publicly available data to it, so you don't just need to be federally funded to access some of the data. The elevation products are mostly publicly available, so you can go to pgc.fridge.umn.edu, or just Google PGC Fridge and it'll take you there to access these data. For federally funded, OPP funded researchers, the commercial satellite imagery is available through this. So we host over about 30 petabytes of data. So how do users find the actual data that they want? And the developer team at PGC has just done a phenomenal job of building this interface so that you can quickly find the data relevant to your scientific or logistical question. So I encourage people to look at Fridge to rapidly find remote sensing information of their field site or any other site of interest that they have. This is a screenshot from it. So you log in, and within about 30 seconds, you can start loading samples of the data, place an order to download the full resolution, and then PGC will set it up for you, hook you up with a 50 centimeter, 30 centimeter multispectral data of pretty much anywhere in the Arctic, with typically many frames over time to study how landscapes evolve. That's one of the main use cases of PGC's data, is to understand how these terrains, specifically in the Arctic, which is more dynamic than the Antarctic, how are they changing over time, and how does that pose risks and hazards to native communities and to others in the Arctic. That was the digital way that we engage with our community, but just as important is the analog way in which we work with our users. So you'll find us at many major conferences. We host workshops ourselves, and we provide on-site support. We do on-site support every field season in Antarctica. We really, really want to do this for the Arctic. It's more challenging because work is less centralized in the Arctic, but for folks on this call, we're always looking for ways to be more hands-on with our support of the Arctic research community. So that's one of our user services members, Stephanie Lind, in Antarctica a year and a half ago. We want to do more of that hands-on work with the Arctic research community than we already do. So if you look at the work that we do with Arctic researchers, we provide tons and tons of license data and high resolution topography. We do less of the one-on-one geospatial consultation and work with Arctic researchers, but that's something that I'm really motivated to increase as the still fairly new director, is to work more hands-on with Arctic researchers, provide more custom mapping services, project support. I think there's a lot more that we can contribute. So I encourage you to reach out to us, and we can figure out how we can best help with your research. Okay, let's get to the actual hazards that we're addressing. And I kind of want to, this is the one question I kind of rephrased because we don't at PGC specifically address these scientific and logistical issues ourselves. We support our users who do that. So this is a really, really fun exercise for me, is to go through PGC's user community and see how they are using PGC data to help with hazard assessment and risk mitigation in the Arctic, specifically in the Arctic. And I took a look at the IARPC website, and this line stood out to me. The progress will be the results of fundamental and applied research, enhanced monitoring, sustained observations, and predictive modeling. So the enhanced monitoring and sustained observations, obviously that can be done on the ground as well, but that's essentially what PGC can provide from space primarily with the remote sensing data that we provide. And it's really, really satisfying to see researchers take advantage of the resources that PGC can provide in this sense, this monitoring over the sort of decade time scale of observations, decades time scales, and sustained observations to understand how landscapes are evolving and how that poses risks to communities in the Arctic. So I won't read through all of these, but this is just sort of a smattering of publications that have come out in the last couple of years with some authors and co-authors on this call of just the range of processes that have direct implications for communities, mostly in Alaska, but we also support research in Greenland and elsewhere to best support researchers who are trying to help with communities there and make sure that major risks can be mitigated. A lot of effort on permafrost evolution, obviously meltwater off of glaciers, supraglacial melting, proglacial melting in the near proximity, glacial surges, near proximity to communities, I should say, glacial surges, flow rates, flood events. All of these are processes that can be monitored in 3D from remote sensing data. And there's just an incredible community of researchers who are taking those 30 petabytes of data that we maintain and doing tremendous work with it. So if you were to sort of compile them all, permafrost thaw is a major application of the work of the data that we provide. Landslides, volcanic activity, as I mentioned, progressial melting, glacial surges, riverbank erosion. That's what I've worked on with groups in the past. Crevasse evolution, so risks and hazards to field teams as well, as sort of a major element of work in the Arctic, obviously. So, and I should also mention is that we've seen researchers do work with PGC data for mapping of human infrastructure. So where are the communities that are of most risk from these processes? So take it to the full extent in terms of not just what are the processes, but where are the communities that are most affected or at most risk from these processes as well. So it's really interesting to see those types of studies come from remote sensing data that PGC helps to provide. Uh, so this correlates really, really well, or aligns really, really well with the Arctic report from the IARPC website uh, with regard to threat assessment. So what are the different processes? And there's a lot of overlap between what researchers are publishing on with the data that PGC provides and what have been sort of defined as the major risks threatening communities in the Arctic. So it's really important for PGC to sort of stay aligned with what's most important to the community. So the data and tools that we have and working on developing. So Claire, who's on the call, runs our products and data team. So most of what I'm showing is derived from what she's presented before. Um, Primarily, we work with very high resolution, as in 30 centimeter, 50 centimeter multispectral imagery of the Earth's surface at the poles primarily, and then stereo-derived elevation models. So we're able to make 3D maps of the surface, 3D elevation models of the surface um, with these imaging products, and done that all over the world through time. And I'll show more of that. But that's what you see at the end. The process starts with satellite tasking. So we have part of our user services staff submits these targets to Maxar. So we interface with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and Maxar, the company that provides the satellite and the cameras, to submit tasking, to submit targets. So whenever the satellites have a chance to obtain data over a location on the ground, they do that, and then we return the data, and they do it over time. So you can see that the spatial distribution of targets from this was last year's Arctic tasking submission. It's not random. They're over very specific areas of interest, primarily for hazard risks. You see the coast of Greenland and areas of Alaska that are at risk. So this is where the process starts. Whenever we give our presentations, you typically see where the process ends with these amazing data products, but just as important is where it starts. So that's something that researchers can work with PGC on, is to get targets into the queue so that we can monitor these places that are at risk from a changing Arctic. How does that manifest in terms of the data coverage that we get? So this is a map of Arctic DEM strip density. I forgot to put the scale on it. Claire knows it by heart, but it goes from like 1 to over 111, I think. So some of the areas where you see in yellow have over 100 DEM strips overlapping each other. So those are 100 different time-stamped elevation models. So it's not just observing what happens at these locations, but measuring what happens at these locations. And I'll show you some samples of it coming up. So we're able to monitor the surface in 3 dimensions over time at continental scales, which is really spectacular and really facilitates a lot of work in terms of seeing what communities at risk and the rates of change that impacts communities. This is a visualization of an area of Arctic DEM on the western coast of Greenland, put together by Jesse Baker on our products and data team. So this is a hillshade, a shaded relief map. So it is elevation data rendered as a intuitive visual here. But you're able to see the retreat of a glacier on a marine coast. So just realize that the ability to measure the rates of change and volume changes over time is what goes into making higher precision forecasts of changing scenery, specifically on coastal margins in the Arctic. So this is sort of a really provocative demonstration of what you can do with these types of data. Arctic Dem itself as a product, I assume most of you are already familiar with it. 2 meter per pixel elevation as a mosaic product over all land poleward of 60 degrees north. So the product includes sort of the static mosaics, the different versions of it, but also the individual timestamp strips. That's what I was showing you before. So you can measure change over time. The products are all publicly available with the exception of post-2022 Alaska data. So that was part of the latest license negotiation, is that Arctic Dem as a whole remains publicly available with the exception of the most recent data of Alaska, which is still available to OPP-funded researchers. So we can still make those products, but we can only share them with federally funded researchers, like the licensed imagery itself. And a new innovation is that the algorithm that PGC uses, built by Ohio State University, that makes these stereo models can do it at the full resolution of the imagery at 50 centimeters per pixel. So this is an example of an area on a glacier in Alaska. This is the 2 meter per pixel resolution, and then I will fade it into the 50 centimeter per pixel elevation. These are crevasses on a glacier in Alaska, and you can see the increase in fidelity here. So in terms of field groups, safety, this not only tells you where the crevasses are, but it tells you how deep they are. And then when you image them multiple times, you can see the rate at which they're changing. So just spectacular technology that's sort of resolving features in 3D at the sub-meter scale, which is really, really spectacular. Something that we want to do over larger areas, given the sort of degree of increase in fidelity for these products and the implications they can have for hazards, risks, and safety in Alaska and beyond. Another some less happy news about Arctic Dem is that currently it's not sponsored. This is sort of one of the first manifestations we're seeing of the funding challenges that NSF and Office of Polar Programs are having, is that in our latest renewal, which is finalizing right now, Arctic Dem we're not able to continue with it through NSF funding. So we are currently looking for other places for Arctic Dem to be supported. So that's a open question for people if they have ideas. We're looking all around. We believe in the value of this product for science, for logistics, and for other purposes. So we are actively looking for ways to keep this project going. So as we like to say, that if funding stops, that doesn't mean the Earth stops changing. The Earth is going to keep changing, and we have this incredible record, and we want to continue documenting these changes on the Earth's surface to build up this record of change over time, because that's how we can make these forecasts of how surfaces are changing and how that's impacting communities in the Arctic. I'll wrap up by saying that the scale at which we work really puts us in position to help as many researchers as possible and as many communities in the Arctic as possible. So we work very, very high resolutions at very, very large scales. So any community that falls within that large scale is a community that we believe that we can help. And we always love working with the researchers on the ground who can make that happen with the data that we provide. And that's what I have. Yeah, just about half an hour. I'm glad I left some time for 25, 30 minutes of questions and discussion.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Jay.
Thanks,
This
Anna.
is, yeah, much appreciated. Yeah. Great we have some time here. I definitely have a couple of questions, but I want to make sure others have the opportunity first, and much appreciated. So yeah, whatever you feel comfortable with, if you want to prefer to write in the chat and I'll read them, or if you want to raise your hand, or you can just grab the microphone and ask too.
I see Rachel in the chat, and she's Rachel's a PGC veteran. So, hey, Rachel, how's it going?
Hi. Well, if you tell me that Arctic DM isn't currently funded, I certainly have questions for you. Particularly on that front, is that something where users could request like on-demand DEM products if I see a super great strip has been collected over my area of interest, can I say, can you pretty please make me a DEM of this area?
Not through our standard arrangement. Like
Okay.
so we're not going to. Oh, so it has been in the past that OPP funded researchers could reach out to us. And Rachel, you know all of this, but for everyone else, could reach out to us for custom DEMs. We're not going to be able to support that anymore. But we would join in on a proposal to do that type of work as a sort of a separate standalone proposal. So.
That's bad to know, but good to know. Thank you.
Allison, go for it.
Hi there. Thank you for the overview and nice to meet you, Jay.
Thanks, Alvin.
I've actually worked with your products over the years up on the North Slope, and I've really appreciated the service you guys have provided over the years. Currently, we're also in an interesting funding situation, but I am wondering if we're using one of the best services for the Arctic DEM. There's a service that we found through your website and I believe ArcGIS Online that we incorporate into the Arctic Research Mapping application as an alternative base map. And I was just wondering if I could share my screen real quickly.
Oh, sure. Let me
See if we're using the best option for that cartographically. Here we go. So, this is the option that we're using, and I'm wondering if I just was looking at your map, if there's a different service option. We're trying to put the best cartographic products out there possible. Like this one from NOAA has been really super helpful. But if there's an alternative, for the Arctic DEM, if you could just share it in email or chat, that would be great. Or if this is the best one.
I can jump in on that one. We have
Yeah, Claire's more, she
Yeah.
knows the details better than I do here. So
the,
yeah.
Great.
the web service that you're looking at, I'm guessing, I'll go look at it right now. I'm guessing is one that actually has a great deal of options for the way you can have it rendered.
Mhm.
So you can render it as just the actual elevation values, or you can render it as a hillshade or any number of things.
Mhm.
I'll take a look. I'll make a note of that and take a look, see what you guys are using and give you a sense of what the options are for what you can render with it.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll share that with the grad student that's been working on this, but cool.
And this is our maps.
Good luck.
This is our
Yeah.
map, right? Okay.
Yeah, I can go ahead and put that right in the chat here for you.
Thank you.
So in regards to the 0.5 meter, so you were talking about the 2 meter Arctic DM product here that Allison, so that 0.5 meters of the 0.5 meter Arctic DM product, so it's not publicly available at the Panarctic. You have to be funded by NSF. For the Alaska region, is that publicly available or is it the same thing?
The 50 centimeters, I don't think we've made available yet. So for Alaska data before 2022 is publicly available. But so we have some 50 centimeter DEMs, but we're still working on them and they're not publicly available or available to researchers quite yet. So
Gotcha. So the imagery, so the 0.5 meter DM that's derived from imagery pre-2022 will become publicly available at some point. Is that?
Yep.
Excellent. Well, that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Well, we do need to find funding for that project.
Right. That's
Great. Good. Thank you. So what kind of dollar amounts are needed to produce, 0.5 meter? I'm just thinking, if me or Allison or Rachel, leads a proposal and we want to help you create this product, how much money would you budget for Alaska versus Panarctic, for example?
we'd have to crunch
It's
the
more,
numbers, but
yeah, it's difficult to put a number on it, a specific number, because there's a great deal of storage and sort of data infrastructure in that front, and so it would depend on the selection of the stack. Some of that's already bespoke in the sense that we've already built it the source data, and we just need to build the actual stuff for delivery. The compute wouldn't be a problem, and so it's primarily a question of that storage, and then probably on the order of 2 FTEs to continue to push through this, some of which would go to our collaborators at Ohio State.
Mhm. Yeah, that give you sort of an order of magnitude. That's for sort of Alaska, not the whole Arctic, right, Claire? Mhm.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not so easily divisible. It's not that Alaska being a sixth of the Arctic is a sixth of the cost, because once Alaska was we decided on Alaska as sort of our prototype, with the intent that we would develop the workflow there, and then the rest would flow a lot more cheaply from there. So it's not that Alaska is more expensive than anything else. It's just that whatever we do first will be more expensive from a development perspective.
Have you guys considered foundation funding for Google Storage or Microsoft?
We're at an order of magnitude where they're not usually giving that away for free.
Sure.
So we have considered some options, but there's also one of the issues we've had with cloud storage in general is that, especially with funding sources being unpredictable, if you don't pay that bill for one day, your data's gone, right?
Yeah.
If the university decides that they can't pay for PGC and we collapse, which isn't going to happen, but just like worst case scenario, 2 years later, I could get new funding, step in, resuscitate our tape library, and we would have it all still. And it's also just cloud computing costs cloud storage costs simply, even in deep storage, simply cannot be as effective in terms of long-term storage as tapes. It's really shocking. 1980s technology.
Yeah, huge challenge.
Emily had a question in the chat here. Would it be possible for the Permafrost Discovery Gateway or the Arctic Data Center to host the Arctic DM?
We have, Jay, I can let you answer if you like, but
Yeah, go for it. Mhm.
we have no intention of not hosting Arctic Dem anymore. It's going to continue to be hosted. All the data that's there is going to keep being there. It's mostly actually hosted on AWS through the AWS Open Data Sponsorship Program, so foundation storage. That it'll be there. It's just the creation of new data sets in the time series is on hold until we can find another sponsor. We are about to release last year's data though, so we'll do one last dump before we have to go look for more money.
In regards to Emily's question there, the Arctic DM, the 2 meter, I think the Arctic Data Center already has a copy of it, right? And it's available on Google Earth Engine, I think, too, and like there's a couple other places that it is stored, right?
Yeah, I don't know if Arctic Data Center actually holds it, because we're talking about a half a petabyte of data, but it's all on Amazon, and it's fairly available, and so people have different slices of it, or they point to the stack collection that describes it, or they point to the Open Data Sponsorship Program registry that uses it, or it is in Google Earth Engine, although I don't think they've graded to the latest versions. So it's certainly hosted in many places.
Yeah, I definitely have it on the wish list for the Permafrost Discovery Gateway and the Arctic Data Center.
But I mean, like if you guys want the 2 meter mosaics, which is only a fraction of the actual data, because right, it's the time series that's the big data store. Anybody can pull it down. You're welcome to have it.
And the time series, you can go to Fridge, and once you get used to the interface, you can get the data you need in 3 minutes. Like the publicly available ones download right away. So that's about as easy as I think we can make it right now. So.
In regards to the time series analysis, like the Arctic DM, you take one image and it involves multiple images that are taken at different times, and also when you do the differencing, So what my question is about, how the georeferencing that you're doing with the imagery that's more recent versus also the historical, you were talking about some of the historical too, like how do you go about the georeferencing of the imagery so you could do these time series analysis and like how good can you get it, like to what kind of like overlap mismatch are you able to get it within?
Blair, do you want to talk the technical stuff? It's a couple meters precision. If I'm
Yeah, the imagery is going to be a couple meters out of the box with a really good elevation model. And then co-registration, you can usually get it down to the subpixel level depending on the quality of the co-registration. But that's for imagery. For the elevation models, it's also plus or minus a few meters. And in the horizontal and in the vertical. And but within an image, or within a single DEM, the precision is going to be far greater than that.
mm-hmm.
I'll keep on asking.
Yeah.
I'll leave a couple quiet and see if someone else popped in. But you mentioned that you're providing quite a bit of support for Antarctic researchers and in regards to their planning and risk and hazard management. So could you give some examples of the type of support that you provide for people, which is like almost near real time, and also maybe more of a longer time scale of what you can offer? To give an example of what Arctic researchers and people, working in the Arctic could work with.
Yeah, so in at McMurdo, they have like the long duration balloon project, and they need to find where did the balloon land. We provide the satellite image to give precise measurements, and then the traverses from McMurdo to South Pole Station. Every year we have students who are monitoring that for them. Landing planes. There's a whole Antarctic infrastructure and logistics section for those types of activities that we help with. So those are sort of just a few of sort of the logistical tasks that we help with, providing custom maps and those sorts of things. But then, like staffing the office in McMurdo, like it becomes sort of a retail job where scientists just knock on the door and say, "Can you help me get this data where it belongs?" And actually, well, Rachel should speak up before she's actually staffed that office, and I haven't. But that sort of one-on-one work that's easier in person, especially with bandwidth challenges, which you would have in the Arctic at a field site and stuff. So that sort of one-on-one work is just easier at a centralized location like McMurdo. So that's kind of the range that we're talking about.
Yeah, that I agree. That definitely seemed like an opportunity for the Arctic crowd to tap into.
Yep.
And a question on the tasking.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, is there an opportunity for people to do a ticket that spans, a couple of years onwards? Because right now the tasking is like the coming season, and if you're a researcher and there's a field site that's been monitored long term, in the field for the last 2 decades or something like that, and you would like to add on to that long-term monitoring program, the satellite imagery availability. So would it be a possibility to, and you have funding, for the next 3 years to do some research project there, would you be able to submit a tasking that for the next 3 years, I'd be interested to have as much images that you'd be able to provide for this specific study area? So it's kind of covers the award that you received from NSF, for example.
Yeah, so we submit our tasks once a year for the Arctic and once a year for the Antarctic, but we have sort of continuity, and that's where our sort of user services, the relationships with the researchers that we support comes in handy, because Mike Cloutier is our tasking specialist, and you can just work with him and make it clear that you're going to be working at the site. Well, so he can't submit it for 2 seasons from now, but you can get it into our system, and then we can work with you to have it followed up upon. So
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic if that ability, I think it's great right now that you can make this wish, for the coming season, but if it could be like a little asterisk or marker flag, whatever, to say that this is a site that is also interest to have in the coming 3 years. And maybe for example, the permafrost community at the international level might come together as a working group and say, hey, these 20 sites across the Arctic it's especially valuable to us as a research community, and we would love for the PGC to have maybe the next decade, scans of this area repeat every year. So there's an opportunity to have that long-term perspective, not just this coming season, but the next coming year, to kind of build that into your planning.
My understanding, Claire should correct me, but like the sea ice community has sort of really collaborated well on submitting tasking because you don't want 10 different researchers all submitting the same target. But I don't know if, Claire, there's more about sort of the multi-annual targeting, or if I haven't talked to Mike about that, how that's handled.
Yeah, I mean, the reason we don't is because we don't want something that's no longer needed to stick around in the request set and take away opportunities from things that are wanted. So presumably if somebody is still, funded by the groups that we support, they could put in that same point for the next season. Then we're sure that it's what they need this season. Your question, I think, is actually, so that's the reason we don't do it for single groups. Your larger question, though, is if the permafrost community as a whole says, whichever one of us is funded at any given time, doesn't matter. What's important is that this whole community decided these are the 20 sites that we need to make sure are covered. That would be extremely valuable for PGC, because then we could say, this is a community responsive set of tasking. Here's the documents or the meetings that came from. And it wouldn't matter if there happened to be somebody who's OPP funded from that community or not. It would be more of a long-term community impact as opposed to a specific project targeted impact.
I like it. Great. I'm gonna suggest that to my colleagues around the world and see what they think about that opportunity. That's really neat that you could consider that.
It's a great resource, and it's always satisfying to see researchers using it, but in a collaborative way. So one of our tasks is to deconflict the targets to optimize the return. But if groups do some of that ahead of time, so then you're far more assured to get the data that you want as a community, as opposed to a less organized submission.
Any other thoughts or comments from you that are here with us today? I agree, Rachel. Fridge is great. It's awesome.
Allison, would you be willing to stay on for just a sec? I want to screen share something with you and
Oh, absolutely. That'd be great. Thanks, Claire.
Yeah. Well, let's close it up here then, Tony, with a recording. And thank you so much, Jay and Claire, for coming here today. And this will be up on the YouTube. So I bet there will be, as people become aware of it, get a lot of views there. So thank you so much. Tony, anything you want to close up with?
No, just reiterate thanks. And I popped the link again to the event page in the YouTube channel where the recording will be up later today. And then just one final thing I'll post in the chat, just wanting to hear from the community. If there's any other topics you'd like to see this team or other teams or communities within IARPC cover, we do have a form where you can submit any ideas. But that is all from me. I'll stop the recording, but we can stay on the line and keep chatting. But thanks all again for joining today.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.